Howdy, ladies and gentlemen. This is Paul, the Redneck Thinker. Thomas Jefferson said, "If you want something you've never had, you must be willing to do something you've never done." Benjamin Franklin said, "Without continual growth and progress, such words as improvement, achievement, and success have no meaning." Basically, get off your duff, get to working, you've got dreams, you've got goals, you've got to do what it takes to get them. Like, subscribe, comment, show what your opinion is. Let me know if you like what you've seen. And I thank you for your support. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about something that most people don't think about, which is how to properly resist what's going on in the government. You have disagreements with the government. Everybody's got disagreements with the government. I'm going to tell you how to resist the government via a minarchist standpoint. Minimal government bordering on anarchy. Now, I am well aware that my viewpoint will never see, in my lifetime at the very least, a valid consideration. There are too many people that are under the impression that they have to have government in so many facets of their life, whether it's federal, state, or local. And, in all honesty, there are certain things that should be done by government. But if you're looking at it as, hey, the government is an evil, a necessary evil, but an evil nonetheless, then you start realizing, hey, not everything that the government does needs to be done by the government. It doesn't mean that I am wanting anarchy. As I say, minimal government bordering on anarchy. Because if you take a look at it, how many local governments say that you shouldn't be allowed to grow food on your own property? No joke, this actually happens in some places. Not everywhere, thank God. Not everywhere, but it happens. There's a movement by the federal government to control water on your property, especially if you create, say, a pond, a lake, whatever. The government wants to control that. Yet, if you take a look at Flint, Michigan, government controlling water is not necessarily a good thing. On top of that, you take a look at the corporate control of government as it stands. I am well aware, even as somebody who is an adherent to Adam Smith, if you don't know who Adam Smith is, pick up Wealth of Nations. It will be a boring read to many people, but it is a valid look at capitalism. Once you read it, you go, wait a minute. This is what capitalism is supposed to be. This is what capitalism is now. No, that's not capitalism. Capitalism adjusts, sure, but what we have now, the government is not supposed, government and corporations should not interact the way that they do. When you start taking a look at these things, you start realizing really quickly that there is a distinct need to pull government back. It doesn't need to be what it is today. Now, should we consider these things? Yes. And so I'm going to give you, even if you're a liberal, the right way to consider how you resist certain things going on within the government. It's going to be a path into history, but I'm going to show you the examples of why I stand against certain things and why I am saying that you should stand against certain things. One of the first things that people start talking about, if they're on the liberal side, is they start talking about systemic racism. Oh, the government's got systemic racism. I don't fully agree with that in the sense that they're talking about, but I agree that there is a bias within the government, but I don't think that the bias is towards people of color anymore. It's towards political ideologies, it's towards anybody that can't serve the state. But at one point, yes, there was systemic racism within our federal government. I am well aware of that. You want to know when it came at the strongest? Dead serious. It actually happened, and it actually has a particular start date. There was some before this, but it started in 1913 when Woodrow Wilson took office. Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat, was also well known for his love of bureaucracy. So, systemic racism, in the form that people think about today as systemic racism, started at the same time that we got the president that caused the massive bureaucracy that became our modern day government started. Now, when Wilson was elected, he appointed Albert S. Burleson to be his Postmaster General. Burleson was born in Texas and came from, his father was a Confederate officer. Not like that explains everything, but it does explain some of the things. This is an old Confederate family working under another old Confederate family, because both Wilson and Burleson believed in the, oh, if we had just done things this way. So Wilson and Burleson started working on the post office. Now, what happened was, once Burleson got in there, him and Wilson got together and said, okay, most everybody, when they see the federal government, they see the post office. No joke, at that time, that was the federal government. That was almost the entire extent of how people saw the federal government. There were a lot of blacks working for the post office at that time. They were hard workers. This was upward mobility for people, not just for blacks, but for whites as well. But this was upward mobility. Plus, it was a prominent role that people got to see. So Burleson, under the direction of Wilson, started doing away with blacks. They were either demoted or they were just gotten out of positions, period. And then that became the way that the rest of the government was done. This was how systemic racism fully got integrated into the government. It started at a time that government was also growing. So, it is intrinsically linked. The systemic racism that liberals all whine and moan about was started by a liberal, because Woodrow Wilson is considered a progressive Democrat, and this was how systemic racism came into play. And this wouldn't change until the presidency of Truman, another Democrat. He was forced into changing it, but I think Truman would have changed it anyway. Truman was one of those kinds of people who just, he didn't cotton to that sort of government. Having two parts to the government was expensive, and Truman, for all of his issues, didn't believe in spending that much money, and so this was spending more money than it needed to be spent. But this was how this started in this country. You want to complain about this? Well, you have a large government and it starts playing favorites. It starts doing these things like the systemic racism. Large government does this, and we have done nothing but grow government ever since then. And you take a look at all the different times that government has been proven to have catered to certain groups over others. Yes, some people will only see that, hey, it's catered to white people. It's also catered to black people, much to the detriment of the nation. You don't cater as a minarchist. I don't believe that government should cater to anybody but the people as a whole. You don't have these things with a small government. You do your job and go home. You can't do that when you have an overly large government. You have people that have way too much time on their hands. So let's take a look at another facet here. The next area that we're going to consider is that when tyrannies grow, they use it as a way to start putting people in jail that disagree with them. Or they just put people in jail just to have control and power. So when a criminal justice system like the United States is arresting as many people as they're arresting, there comes a point where you need to consider why we started going down that path. Because this is not about law and order at that point. It becomes about control and about things that are not about freedom. You are not able to have a free society if every time somebody dislikes something, it becomes criminal. Case in point, try playing poker in any state that you want. While technically not illegal, at the same time you can't go play at casinos. Oh, but so-and-so has a gambling addiction and we can't... No. Just because somebody has a gambling addiction doesn't mean that I can't play poker or you can't play poker. These arguments are not for the betterment of society. Let's take a look at what Biden did. I'm going to give you a clip from Scripps News. It's from Scripps Howard News. This is going to explain what Biden did. And then we're going to go over these mandatory minimums that took power away from the judges to actually mete out justice. Instead, it became a political issue.
Former Vice President Joe Biden seems primed to be at the head of a crowded Democratic 2020 field, but his role as a leading architect in America's crackdown on drugs could be a major liability for his campaign.
I think the problem with Joe Biden isn't that he was a passenger on the drug war train, he was driving it.
In 1988, as chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Biden co-sponsored the Anti-Drug Abuse Act. The bill led to new mandatory minimum sentences for drug offenders and created a sentencing rule that led to stiffer punishments for crack cocaine users than those who used powder cocaine. In 1989, when then-President George H.W. Bush called for $8 billion to help law enforcement in the war against drugs, Biden said it was inadequate and called for stricter punishments for both drug users and dealers.
The president says he wants to wage a war on drugs, but if that's true, what we need is another D-Day, not another Vietnam, not another limited war fought on the cheap and destined for stalemate and human tragedy.
Then in 1994, Biden spearheaded the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, a bill that touched nearly every aspect of law enforcement and is credited for leading to a boom in for-profit prisons and mass incarceration. And while every other candidate in the 2020 Democratic primary supports marijuana legalization or decriminalization, Biden hasn't jumped on the 420 bandwagon yet. His position on marijuana itself hasn't wavered much over the years. In 2010, he said legalization would be a mistake, and he's been relatively mum on the issue since.
Any person today who is a serious candidate for any high elected office, who doesn't really look at marijuana, at least decriminalization, if not legalization, as what is needed in this country as a baseline. If somebody doesn't take that position, it's going to be really hard for them to convince people who have criminal justice reform as a top issue that they're a serious candidate.
Ed Chung, who served as a senior policy advisor on criminal justice, policing, and civil rights issues under the Obama-era Justice Department, says Biden can still make the case that his views have evolved along with the country when it comes to drug policy.
And the question is, what policies and what positions is he going to take now as president, and is it going to be a continuation of some of the things that was championed under the Obama administration?
But Collins says there's not much Biden can do or say that will erase the damage of his former policies.
It's one thing to apologise, right? I think it's very easy to apologise. It's another thing to actually sit down with the communities impacted by the war on drugs, predominantly communities of colour, and ask, should I become president? What can I do to repair the damage? The damage of mass incarceration, the damage of that tough on crime approach.
Now, you may be wondering, this is about crack and cocaine and all that. It's not. It's about taking away control from judges. You're punishing people, not the dealers, you're punishing people that have addictions or they're just everyday users instead of punishing the criminals. You're making these people feel like they're constantly needing to do whatever the government says. And okay, fine. You believe that the government should tell you what to do about everything. I don't. I'm not saying that people should be using drugs all the time. No, I would actually prefer them not. But it doesn't help if somebody who is addicted goes to jail, because then when they get out, even if they've become clean, which, as it's been proven many times, these jails are not drug-free, they have a hard time finding a job. They get put down. They end up wanting to get back into the system that they had just come out of because they can't find anything else to do, so they're committing more crimes. Think about this. None of this is doing any good for anybody. Marijuana, I keep hearing, it's a gateway drug. No, it's not. The only gateway is it's a gateway for cops to get into their life. Smoking a joint does not make you a criminal. Should not make you a criminal. Playing poker should not make you a criminal. There are so many things that are criminalized. And then take a look at, if you're a conservative listening to me, this law and order system that so many conservatives tout as a good thing, look how it's being used against Trump right now. I have never voted for Trump. I'll admit to it. I didn't like him, and until this election, I was never planning on voting for him. This election, I'm actually planning on voting for him. For the simple fact of that if the Democrats are going at him this hard, if the system is going at him this hard, then he must actually have been trying to do some things right. I don't agree with everything that was done in his administration, but you're going after him for doing something that thousands, if not millions of people have not done before, with overvaluing product or property. Seriously? New York State is going after him for a property in Florida? No. And then you take a look at the current trial, which is over supposed hush money. No. He did something that has been a legal tactic for decades, if not longer. Why aren't you going after everybody that does that? No, you're going after somebody that opposes a man that you have been in contact with his campaign, not his administration, his campaign. The judge. These judges have been hanging around with the campaign, not the administration, the campaign. There's something wrong about that on so many levels. Criminal justice system is not meant to go after your enemies, but it's being used for that. Or it's being used to extort money out of people. Take a look at all of these different districts, these different areas that use traffic cops as a way to generate revenue. Not to actually enforce laws, but to generate revenue. There comes a point where a justice system that is this twisted needs to go away. It is doing nobody any justice. Because even when the victims, you take a look at how many of these victims of rape, the real victims of rape, don't want to go before the justice system because of how they're painted by the system. So many times, and then add on top of the fact of that you've got these real victims that are struggling while you have these fake victims that are using it to attack people. How many times have people been accused of rape, and then after they've been convicted, it's been found out that they have been lied about, and nothing happens? Rarely. Once in a blue moon, something might happen to the person that lied, but basically nothing really does happen to these women that claim that they were raped. This isn't criminal justice. This is injustice. How many times has it been proven that these people that have been convicted for murder or for any number of crimes were convicted wrongly? There comes a point where you need to examine the criminal justice system. You do not keep on this same path. There comes a point where you start to realize that we don't have a criminal justice system. We have a system that is predicated on making you want to bow down to the government, where you're having to worry so much about anything that you do could cause you to be convicted of a crime when it's not needing to be that way. This is not a free society if you have this percentage of a population. I mean, currently, looking it up, the answer is 0.7% of the population that's in jail. 5.1% of the population will be in jail or has been in jail. Total. 9% of the male population is likely to be in jail at some point in their life. It's growing on top of that. The United States is the leading jailer in this world. We beat out Russia, South Africa, the European average, period. We're jailing more people than totalitarian governments. Seriously. We are beating out totalitarian governments for people that are in jail. That's idiotic. For a land of the free, we ain't very free. And this is a mark of totalitarianism. And I am wanting to fight that with everything I've got. Not the criminal justice system. I honestly believe that we need to put murderers in jail. I believe we need to put thieves in jail. But we've got so many other crimes that aren't being handled. So let's examine another area in which the government has grown so big that people aren't paying attention. Now, I am not opposed to people having investments. I'm not opposed to people owning businesses, but if you take a look at members of Congress, heck, for that matter, no matter who the president is, people within the administration on all levels that have questionable investments. So Congress and people that are working for the different presidents, all of these weird investments that they've got in stocks, all of these connections that make them seem suspect. You have to begin to wonder what is going on, especially when certain companies get privileges that they shouldn't. We're not talking about tax credits. Tax credits, if you actually study it, when you don't raise the taxes on businesses, then they're able to grow. The employees are paying out, because we have an income tax in this country, what the employees pay out in income tax more than makes up for not taxing these companies to oblivion. But this isn't what we're talking about here. We're talking about business and how it's shaping what members of Congress and members of the government are doing, these bureaucrats. You hear, like Nancy Pelosi, our immigration status, our immigration policies, no joke, are so screwy because they want to be able to hide these illegals so that they can be used to harvest crops, because regular folks who probably wouldn't mind doing the work, you have unemployment, people that are underemployed, unemployed, that probably could do the harvesting, but because government requires them to get paid so much money, these illegals come in and do the work. Well, you take a look at how all of this is done. Let's listen to Nancy Pelosi on this one and how she responded to it.
We have a shortage of workers in our country, and you see even in Florida, some of the farmers and the growers saying, why are you shipping these immigrants up north? We need them to pick the crops down here. But that doesn't mean that we don't recognize our moral responsibility as well. When the president, the former, occasional occupant of the White House.
Now, we need people in Congress that are not focusing on the different things that their donors are telling them to do. Voters need to be telling them what to do. Not to mention, they're getting an inside track on these stocks. They understand why immigration needs to be all muddled up, because these large farms, not these family farms, but these large farms are the ones that are requesting these illegals. Then you take a look at all these companies that are getting special privileges from the government that take out their competition because the government bureaucrats and Congress are making it so that small businesses have no chance to grow because they're overregulated. It is not a joke when you hear or read books or hear TV shows or something like that talking in the old days, oh, my senator, my congressman. These businesses have owned Congress for too long. That's why the voters need to be getting these people out of office. And it's a Republican and Democrat problem. It isn't just Nancy Pelosi. It's so many of these members of Congress that are in there for so long that they start trading these stocks, and then they start going, well, we can't hurt this business And you're thinking, oh, well, there must be a reason. You take a look at it, and they're trading this stock. This needs to end. And it's not a capitalistic society at this point when this is happening. What is happening is that the government is aiding these people, both in Congress and in the government itself, the bureaucrats and the people that are being brought in by the presidents. That's one of the reasons why I had a problem with Trump, because I was worrying about that. There comes a point where you take a look at what you're getting. Yes, there's a guy running for Congress outside of the Chicago area. This guy's ran an energy company. Yes, I would like to see him elected to Congress. Why? Because we have a need to have members of Congress that understand the energy industry. Because energy is a major deal right now. We need people that have worked within that and can actually give us solutions that are possible. Do I want him up there trading stocks because of his knowledge? No. I want him up there because of his knowledge. The person he's running against has been in that office for so long that he's become part of the inner circle of Congress. We need to start taking a look at these members of Congress and start getting them out of office. If they start trading stocks, at that point, they're not doing anything illegal right now because there are no laws for it, even though they make laws making it illegal for us to do all kinds of things. Take a look at Nancy Pelosi's attack on the Robinhood app. Oh, people shouldn't have that kind of power, but she has that kind of power. She doesn't want us to have the power, but she wants to keep that power to herself. These members of Congress want to take that power away from us. So what we need to do is take that power away from them. You do that by voting them out. And you shrink government so you don't have so many bureaucrats that are so well connected to these companies that they're making a killing off the stock market because they know what is going on. This is just another area that we need to look at. Now let's take a look at yet another area that we need to consider. Okay, now here's something that most people don't realize. There is a reason why members of Congress were not supposed to be meeting like they meet now. They were supposed to go back and talk to their constituents, actually meet with their constituents, not with business groups, not with special interest groups, but they were supposed to meet with their constituents. They were supposed to actually have face time with individuals that are part of their community that they represent. They don't do that. They stay in Washington so much and only come home for weekends and for short stays. And they lose connection with their constituents. Not with their donors, but with their constituents. These members of Congress staying in Washington, D.C. is bad because all they're doing is dealing with these functions that are being held by special interest groups, or holding meetings with people from these special interest groups, or having meetings with lobbyists. All of these things that are taking their focus away from what their constituents need. This was not how Congress was supposed to be. They were supposed to be representatives of the people. Quit calling them leaders. The House of Representatives were supposed to represent the people. The senators were supposed to represent the state governments. That populist movement that caused senators to be elected by the people should never have happened. There is a reason why it was put in there that the Senate represented the state governments, because the state governments were supposed to have a voice just like the people have a voice via the House of Representatives. They are not leaders. They're both representing a certain category. The representatives represent us, the people. The senators represent the voice of the state governments. If you think about it, if the senators were no longer being what they are now, if they were back to representing the state governments, how much you want to bet these unfunded mandates and so much of this garbage would not get passed that causes state governments to not have a voice and to have to spend an untold amount of money because of waste. Now, this is another area that we need to consider. We need to go back to the representatives actually interacting with the people. Okay, Rand Paul and so many of these others that have been attacked by people. Notice that every one of these members of Congress that have been attacked, they've been attacked by Democrats. If these people were connected, if these members of Congress were connected to the people, there would be a lot less of the chaos going on right now in the government and in these states. Because they would understand what's going on and they would be voting in a way that actually is representing the people, not special interest groups, not lobbyist concerns. This is affecting us, and it's causing government to grow because we're catering to the lobbyists, we're catering to the special interest groups. You shrink government back to the point that the members of Congress are going back home and talking to the people that they're supposed to be representing. All of a sudden, you're not having government intrusion all the time. You're having common sense being applied to the government. This is a very necessary step, and it needs to be handled, but that takes you. It does. It takes all of us to do this. So, that is yet another way that we can quit having all of this weirdness going on. And it's just another way for us to consider. I say all of these things because I honestly believe in a monarchist approach. Minimal government. For freedom to succeed in this country, you've got to have less government, less intrusion into our lives. Yes, there are different things that can be done, but it starts with we've got to stop having a government that is constantly intruding in our lives. Now, I'm not ever going to have a cop come up to me and me start shouting, "Oh, I'm a sovereign citizen." I'm not into all that. If there are people listening that are, okay, fine. I don't have an argument with you. You have your own reasons for saying that. And I can understand some of those reasons. But I still believe that minimal government is what we need in this country. I am going to keep fighting for minimal government. The reason is because minimal government can't become a tyrannical government. It can't destroy lives that are innocent. That is what we need to change in this country. We no longer need to have a government that can interrupt people's lives on a whim. You should not have cops busting down the doors of innocent people and killing them in this country. You should not have a government that is allowing illegal immigrants to constantly flow in here for whatever reason. There are so many reasons that they have them come into this country without there being a change to that system. Look, I am not saying that everything will become peachy and glorious with minimal government. But if you start taking away their power, they have to start listening to us, the people. I don't want a revolution. I don't want a civil war. I don't want violence. I want common sense to start back in this country. Minimal government will start removing some of the inflation. Stop having us have an economy that is based around a stock market that is basically a massive casino. Stop having a government that rules instead of listens. Those are the things that I want. I don't want to destroy our government. What I want is for us to go back to having a constitutional government. We don't have that currently. We have a government that is drunk on power, and they took that power from us. I want us to start reading Samuel Adams, Patrick Henry, the Anti-Federalist. Everybody reads the Federalist on all the Federalist papers and what they wrote, but they rarely ever read the Anti-Federalist. We need to start listening to the Anti-Federalist as to why we have the things, the freedoms that were codified. We need to go back to having freedom. Notice I don't say liberty, I say freedom. For the simple fact of libertarians have overtaken that. And I don't like the Libertarian Party. It, like the GOP, is a big tent party that has all of these people in it that can't make up their minds, which makes a political party that can't make up their minds. We need to have multiple parties in this country. That will start giving us freedom back too. There are so many different aspects to what we can do to make a more free society. You want to complain about things? Fine, but let's work together. Let's make it better. Yes, as there are liberal causes that conservatives need to take a look at and go, wait a minute. Instead of fighting these things, they need to take a look at it and go, wait, they've got a few good ideas. And there are conservative ideas that liberals need to take a look at and go, hey, that actually falls in line with what we're claiming that we're for. But you can't do that with the political system that we have today. You can't do that with a mainstream media like we have today. All you can do is sit back and basically watch a bunch of idiots, because that's what we've got in Congress right now, ruin our nation. AOC was elected. How many times has she gone up there and proven that she doesn't actually understand the laws that she is supposed to be working with? Seriously. You've got her not understanding what the RICO Act is. You've got her not understanding the immigration laws of this country, yet she's up there going, but they didn't break any laws when they came in this country. Yes, they did. There are actual laws, even though they're written kind of obtusely, that say that they're not supposed to be entering this country through any means but through a legal port of entry. There's also laws that say that the racketeering is a crime. It's not a category of crimes. It's an actual crime. And AOC is not the only Barbie doll, because there are plenty of Ken dolls up there too that say the same thing. You've got people up there that are not serious people. You need to get them out of office. You need to put people in office that are not trading stocks every day and taking their focus away from all kinds of... There are members of Congress that literally sit there and start fights, not for any practical purpose, but because they can. There's that one dude that, in one of his debates, it's the guy that pulled the lever, the fire alarm lever. I'm an angry black man. They don't listen to the angry black man. Oh, dude. Your opponent sounds better than you do because he's not sitting there screaming. If you have something to say, say it. But then you take a look at, there's so many people on the Republican side as well that are just as silly. We need to get away from that. Now, there's a reason why I like Hawley, that one senator. There's a reason why I like Thomas Massie, because they make points. But they're a minority. Some of the time I like Marjorie Taylor Greene. Other times I'm like, what is she doing? There is no common sense in what these people are doing. Get rid of them. Elect people that make sense. Just because somebody sounds like they're going to be good, okay, fine, let them serve one term in Congress. See how they act with their one term in Congress. And then take a look at the rest of government. Why do we need all of these people in Congress? In Congress. Look at all these bureaucrats, pardon me. Why do we need all these bureaucrats? Seriously, we don't need these many bureaucrats. We don't need the government to be this size. All they're doing is taking up space, wasting our tax dollars, finding new ways to make themselves look important so that they can take the power from you, the people. Now, I hope you think about all of this that I've said. I want you to consider what I've said. This is Paul, the Redneck Thinker. I want you to have a good day, and I want you to think about all this. Thank you.